Yeah, you go. Oh. Shannon and I are like working on our pose. Like it's very natural. Like
So I had no idea how
okay,
unphotogenic
so
I was. Your iPads have a cloth.
Your iPad.
That's where your packet is anyway. The iPad. You do not. That's your iPad tonight?
you know what? I'm gonna change it. I'm gonna put first councilman. What happened?
I'm gonna start.
No, she came and turned them all on. Oh my. Okay. Clearly we do what Don says.
Well, Donna Ricks Michelle.
It was Al who.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Westminster December 12th, 2016 City Council meeting. Council, make sure all your mics are on, please. And after that, ladies and gentlemen, if you would please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And for your benefit, there are flags in both the back and the rear, so that way you won't have to turn around. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Parker, if you would, please take the roll.
Atchison,
Here.
Baker,
Here.
Bird,
Here.
DeCambra,
Here.
Garcia,
Here.
Pinter,
Here.
Seitz.
Here.
Next item on the agenda will be the consideration of the minutes of the November 28th. I've got do me a favor, turn your mics off for a moment. Okay. Now, if you want to make the motion, please do it now. Mr. Baker.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that, the city council adopt, the consent agenda, items 8, I'm sorry. Let me correct that. I move that, the city council approve the minutes of the November 28, 2016 meeting as they are presented.
Is there a second, Mr. Canberra?
Second.
All those in favor, please
Aye.
signify by aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion will carry. Next item on the agenda will be citizens' presentations, which we have none tonight. Next item after that will be citizen communication. This is a period of time that we have the audience, that they're invited to come to the council and speak on any item they have, unless it's an item that is already scheduled for a public hearing, and then we would ask you to wait until that time. The public comment period is scheduled for up to 5 minutes. There is new activity going on tonight with the renovation, so when you come to the podium, you'll be asked to identify yourself with your name and your address. Once you've done that, the clock will start to talk down. Pick this little clock that's on the dish. It'll be on a green light as long as you're okay. At 1 minute left, it'll go yellow, and at the red light, your time is up. So we ask you to please work with us on this, and if we have any problems, we'll try to get them ready by next Monday. So at this time, I'll open the floor up to anyone who has any items they'd like to bring to the council at this time. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Jackie Phillips. My address is 8960 Fox Drive. That's in Thornton. I have to go. Hello, City Council members. I know most of you. As you know, I'm an attorney, and we specialize in school-to-prison pipeline. So I came and spoke to you last spring about a case that I had, a school-to-prison pipeline case, and I'm here to speak to you again about another school-to-prison pipeline case coming out of Westminster High School. And I'm aware that the school piece isn't relevant, but there's an SRO piece that is relevant, and that's why I'm here tonight. I did want to begin with the current Colorado School Discipline Report Card from August 2016, put out with information from Colorado Department of Education, and it has key findings. And one of the key findings is, it says a mere 10 out of Colorado's 179 school districts accounted for over 85% of statewide racial and ethnic disparities in out-of-school suspensions. And this was from 2014, 2015. And on those, then they list, of course, the 10 districts, and unfortunately, Westminster 50 is on the list. Westminster 50 is also on the list for suspensions, expulsions. I mean, they're, pretty much across the board kind of flagged. So what's happening currently is the case I have is a student of color, but the bigger problem is that this is also a student with severe trauma and disabilities. And so what's happened in the school is that the SROs there's a mandated training. So Colorado passed a school discipline law in 2012. Part of that law is school resource officers very specific about the training that they have to have. Not the kind of training, but just that they have to have training. So when they do have training, the initial training that a lot of them do is it's a webinar, and it's pretty basic. And I don't know what Westminster does for their SRO training. If it's, I know there's a beginner's course, then there's an advanced course, and then some police departments will go above and beyond and send their officers like to the Restorative Justice Conference that Colorado does, or even to some of the national conferences for SROs. Again, I'm not clear what happens with the Westminster Police, but I am clear that in this case, this student who will be going to court now because of an incident that happened at school, and that's why we call it a school-to-prison pipeline case. Some people don't like the word prison, but you get the idea, I'm sure. I mean, this isn't a new idea. You can Google it. You can find all the information that you would want. In this case, the student, because of his disabilities, the SRO stated to the parents that he was not aware that the student had any disabilities. And so that's a problem because under federal law, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, when a student has a behavior plan, which this student did, a very specific behavior intervention plan, and in that plan it talks about what are the kid's triggers, what are the replacement behavior, what to say to the kid, what not to say, basically how to handle the kid so that he doesn't have disciplinary removals that are related to his disability. So in this case, because the SRO stated to the parents that he was unaware of the student's disabilities, that means the SRO never saw the student's behavior plan. And if the SRO would have had some kind of training on how to work with kids with disabilities, or if he would have even been aware that this student had a very specific behavior plan, then we feel confident that we would not be preparing right now to go to court, for this student to go to Westminster Municipal Court for this student on an SRO ticket. So that's what we're asking is maybe there can be some more training for the SROs, or maybe it's some specific things with specific kids. I mean, there are 2 SROs at Westminster High School. I can tell you that's highly unusual to have 2 students. I want to end by saying that we did meet with the school, on the issue with the student, and with attorneys and parents in the school. And it was great. It was a great meeting with the school. We're not here to complain about the school because the school was amazing. Everything was resolved with this student to everybody's satisfaction. A really nice non-adversarial meeting where, it was big, everyone went away, satisfied. So the last remaining thing, and why I am here, is just to ask if maybe the city council could look at some kind of extra training for the SROs so that these kids with disabilities don't end up in the school-to-prison pipeline. And the school-to-prison pipeline, of course, is overrepresented with kids of color and kids with disabilities. So the family that I'm working with, this student is in both of those categories. And we feel like it's something that could have been prevented. And of course, we never want kids to not be in school and have to end up in court. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, we'll move on to the next item then. This is a report of city officials. Mr. Tripp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of City Council. I'd like to just reserve my comments to one thing tonight. I can't let this evening go by on this momentous occasion of moving into this wonderful new City Council chambers without, first of all, councilors thanking you for supporting the renovation of this project. As the mayor mentioned in his comments in cutting the ribbon, the building has not had a major upgrade for 30-some years, and it was time to have the technology and the accessibility improved to serve all of our citizens. So we really appreciate your support there. But I want to mention the staff team that put this project together, that brought the project in with the help of our general contractor and our architect, but brought the project in on budget, in fact under budget, on schedule. Really outstanding work. And there's a couple people there are a lot of people that were involved in this, but I want to mention Bruce Gruselsky and Tom Octera. And I'm not sure where they are. They're probably breathing a sigh of relief someplace in the building. But I do need to mention those two individuals because they really worked hard to make sure we had the building improved on time and to meet all of our specifications, in addition to a whole score of folks in city government that had a lot to do with this. So again, thanks for your support, and we're really pleased to be here this evening.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next item up is council comments. We have anybody in the city council have any comments they'd like to do tonight? Mr. Baker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to take this opportunity to really convey to my colleagues and to the public at large my extreme opposition to our procedures concerning Westminster police interactions and contact with people that really potentially could be unlawfully present in the United States. I see our published procedures as telling our police to intentionally ignore federal law. How the city deals with the enforcement of federal law is not a new issue. I had always thought, well, the city continuously supports and enforces federal law. I remember one of the first issues told to City Council after my election was how, well, the city could not use federal grant money for a project we had built because we had not followed prevailing wage requirements. So we gave the money back. Just really recently, our council has been informed that we have really mistakenly allowed non-authorized groups to be housed in really facilities that in part were purchased with federal money. So we are in the process of removing those groups from those, facilities. Well, the city follows, obeys, and supports federal law. If we make a mistake, we really correct that mistake and we follow federal law. And moreover, every member of this council has taken an oath to uphold Westminster ordinances, Colorado law, and federal law. We should have no tolerance for any proposal that does not support and enforce any of our laws and ordinances. With that said, let us look at the specific procedures that Westminster Police use to interact with and contact persons that are potentially unlawfully residing in the United States. The really published procedure of the Westminster Police Department in regards to any enforcement action on federal laws is stated in the section on our city website entitled Building a Welcoming Community in Westminster, Colorado. I find, well, the statement vague, and that it can be interpreted in really dramatically different ways. My really reading of the really statement leads me to, believe that this city council is really coercing our really police to be really dishonest and to selectively enforce our laws. I feel, well, the city's misleading but really cleverly crafted statement will corrupt our really police department and really direct them to openly and blatantly ignore federal law. I mean, the procedures as written transform the safeguards of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, specifically equal protection of the law, into worthless words. And this is not a really trivial matter. To really openly and blatantly ignore federal law is unconscionable. This really defiant and bragged about refusal to obey federal law should be as abhorrent to us as was, well, the defiance of some southern governors when they refused to enforce federal civil rights law. Do we really want to be like Orval Faubus when he defied federal law and kept 9 black students from attending Little Rock High School? Are we to be George Wallace as he blocked the door to the University of Alabama to black students? Absolutely not. This council has far higher integrity and ethics than to sink to the level of arrogance and self-righteousness of George Wallace. And yet, here Westminster is, arrogantly implying that we will not enforce federal law. In the case of Governor Faubus, President Eisenhower took, well, the military might and the police power of the Arkansas National Guard away from Governor Faubus, and adding the 101st Airborne Division reminded everyone in Arkansas to do their duty and obey federal law. President Kennedy federalized the Alabama National Guard and had Governor Wallace comply with federal law and remind everyone in Alabama to do their duty. Haven't we learned from American history? Have we become so really sophisticated and clever that we will not remember our own American history? And this is not the first time I have spoken with my colleagues about Westminster's response to immigration situations brought to our attention. After an April 18, 2016 study session in which Richard Garcia candidly admitted that the Providers Advancing School Outcomes, PASO, aided and assisted people that they knew were unlawfully present in the United States, I really shared my concerns with my colleagues, and I submitted formal complaints to the appropriate authorities. Not only did really PASO admit to violating federal immigration law, but they are also violating state daycare laws. Unreally fortunate my really colleagues chose to give really financial aid to the group that was openly and admittedly breaking the law. Perhaps that is why I want to hear our city clearly say we uphold federal law. Now, after the November elections, this issue of non-enforcement of federal law has flared red hot. Some of our really sister cities in the Denver metro area have declared their intention to ignore federal law. I assume these cities made these really declarations because with a new president, they are no longer confident that the federal government will continue to enforce immigration law in a corrupt manner. They fear that really federal immigration law might be fairly and equitably enforced. Inflammatory statements by our really sister cities are meant to push the federal government into really continuing, well, the dishonest law enforcement that has endured for years. A very distasteful aspect of this really situation is that advocates for really selective enforcement of the federal immigration laws cloak themselves in a disguise of caring and compassion. And while really some of those advocates are well-meaning, most have talked themselves into thinking they are aiding poor, desperate immigrants. I mean, the reality is that they are only really facilitating the really exploitation of people. Immigrants today, and especially undocumented immigrants, along with our left-behind native-borns, are the underclass of our really society and are exploited by the wealthy. Immigrants today play the same role in really society as did blacks in the Jim Crow South. They really provide an abundance of willing labor. That abundance lowers wages. More really people needing a place to live drives up the cost of housing. Has this council forgotten, well, the appeal we heard from the WOW group of Westminster? Remember the heartbreaking story of the woman with the low-paid job that could not cover the rent increases, and so she moved to a marginally safe apartment building where she was raped? Remember the really other speakers recounting how they are crushed by low wages and exploding rents? These are, the realities that cause envy and strife between subgroups of Americans. People that are exploited in our really society inflame them in themselves and in others a feeling of injury and unjust treatment. These are the forces that rip apart the fabric of our society. And just like the wealthy Jim Crow elite that employed useful idiots to advance their exploitation of blacks and the disadvantaged whites of the South, today's wealthy elites have useful idiots to advance their exploitation of really immigrants, documented and undocumented, and of the native-born people. And just like the bigots and race baiters of the South that really fanned the flames of hate and justified of the refusal to follow federal laws then, the exploiters of really today use, well, the same tactics of name-calling and fear to really silence anyone that advocates for fairly and honestly following federal law. In this really atmosphere of worry, on November 29th, 2016, I was sent an email of the Sarah Flores in which she expressed her fears. I felt she was very upset and worried. I formed that impression by the fact that she was sending multiple copies of the same email and expressed concern that, well, the messages were not reaching all the council members. They responded before the day ended and sent copies of both her, well, original message and my reply to all of my colleagues. And like Mrs. Flores, I had hoped the really email exchange would begin a conversation. But really, Mrs. Flores and my hopes were in vain. Either really none of the messages reached their intended of the recipients, or my colleagues declined to engage in a conversation with me. On really December 2nd, council members were sent the current procedures on actions by Westminster Police related to the legal status of persons contacted by police. And at council's December 5th study session, we really reviewed those procedures. It turned out they were merely procedures. They were not an official policy. It seems that these really procedures have no author that wrote them. This is just what our really police procedure is. To me, this is the same unaccountable police procedure that really blacks fear when they recount their experience with the unwritten crime of driving while black. On the December 6th, and in a spirit of really collaboration, I sent my colleagues an appeal to explicitly clarify our statement because I felt it could be interpreted in really dramatically different ways. And to clear up any misrepresentation, I suggested adding this wording. Quote, however, in no way should Westminster Police continuing operating procedures be interpreted to imply non-cooperation with really federal authorities. West of the Minster Police have always and will continue to contact federal authorities when any discovery of facts involves violation of federal law, and we will assist federal authorities whenever requested to do so, unquote. I mean, the city staff attempted to weave this really clarification into our statement. My really colleagues chose to reject all efforts to clarify the statement and chose instead what I consider to be a really deceptive, misleading statement which implies Westminster will not enforce federal law. The next day, on really December 7th, I sent an appeal to my colleagues to reconsider this choice. But alas, I have not heard a response from any of my colleagues. For me, the most immediate and of the destructive result of our seeming refusal to enforce federal law is, well, the transformation of our really police department. I fear our really police department is being transformed from a really trustworthy, reliable, impartial enforcers of the law into a really political creature. They are being transformed into a group that does what their really political bosses tell them. Sort of like the Alabama State Troopers in 1965 on Bloody Sunday. Or like, well, the police thugs during really Tammany Hall's rule of New York City. And I don't like that. It is absolutely wrong. I am fully aware that other departments in the metro area have already suffered this really transformation, but I want Westminster Police to be something more than the enforcers of whatever whim the politicians of Westminster decree. At many times during my term on council, I have involved my colleagues in conversations about police. I have really repeatedly expressed my concern that there is a growing gap between law enforcement and the public. And this is not something caused at our local level, but it is a really societal problem that involves everyone. To openly and brazenly imply that Westminster Police will not enforce federal law breeds really disrespect for all law. Why would anyone respect any law they don't like when they see the law routinely ignored and abused by those in power? Why would anyone trust really police to be honest and fair when they know that the police selectively enforce laws to serve the whims and prejudices of their bosses? Police are a foundational institution of our really society. We must always be on guard for, well, the corruption of law enforcement. This is not a new observation. I mean, the necessity of honest law enforcement is why, the United States has a long history of elected sheriffs. By really having the chief law enforcement officer accountable to the voters, the importance of having law enforcement that is trustworthy, reliable, and that fairly enforces our law is emphasized. Federal laws are every bit our laws as are any Colorado laws or Westminster ordinances. We should be eager and happy to obey them. And if we don't like those laws, we have the power to elect new of the legislatures to change them. And if we don't like the guarantees and the limits that the U.S. Constitution sets, we can change those too. Slavery was ended by a constitutional amendment. Blacks and women were empowered to vote by a constitutional amendment. A person's right to sell alcohol was denied by a constitutional amendment. Well, the people, through our representatives, write our laws. Once passed, we must fairly and equitably enforce those laws. Individuals that really violate our laws must be held accountable for their conduct. To allow really some violations of law to be ignored while really other of the violations are enforced is a recipe for chaos. For many years, the dishonest enforcement of immigration law has plagued our country. Westminster must not assist in letting that plague continue. Westminster should never intentionally ignore federal law. Have I really fully conveyed my really disgust with what I see as a policy that ignores federal law? I don't think so. So here's an American story about how a large, competent, necessary organization betrayed their most cherished principles. On March 16th, 1968, elements of the 23rd Infantry Division killed 128 communist insurgents in a bloody day-long battle near Huanggai City. That was, the official story in the Stars and Stripes and all the after-action reports. The entire military hierarchy agreed on the facts of the battle. However, that was not what all of the soldiers in the battle experienced. Indeed, helicopter pilot Warrant Officer Thompson saw such blatant wrongdoing that he landed his helicopter and argued with soldiers on the ground while his door gunner aimed, a machine gun at their brother Americans. Thompson reported what he saw to the appropriate authorities, but they seemed not to care. Other soldiers filed formal complaints. Investigations were conducted, even one by a star-destined young major, Colin Powell. But the most the investigations could add was the inadvertent death of 23 civilians. Other soldiers wrote letters imploring commanders to investigate, but nothing happened. A different soldier wrote letters to 30 members of Congress, but most congressmen and senators ignored the letters. The New York Times and the Washington Post, they weren't interested in the story. Life magazine, Look magazine, Newsweek, they didn't want the story either. In fact, Richard Strout of the Christian Science Monitor observed that American press self-censorship thwarted investigation of the incident. But that self-censorship was much deeper than just the press or Congress. The American military was twisted from high to low. A couple generals, several commanders, the intelligence officer, the military photographer, the medic. How did Pilot Thompson see the wrongdoing on the battlefield? But, the battalion commander and the brigade commander in different helicopters above the same battlefield could not. The point of my story is that we know that event as the My Lai massacre. And that, the U.S. military, the finest military in world history, betrayed itself that day. The roots of that betrayal started well before March 16th, 1968. It started when individuals began to ignore federal law. They had good reason. And after March 16th, many individuals could not bring themselves to uphold the oaths they had sworn. They had good reason. And none of those good reasons held true. Those good reasons were just self-deception. Now, our of the situation is nowhere near as dreadful as was My Lai, but our way forward is the same as My Lai. We must follow federal law. The good reasons that people extend not to follow the law are deceptions and self-delusions. If we truly support our police and ourselves and our society, As leaders of Westminster, we must never coerce our police through the use of vague and ambiguous wording to engage in selective, substandard, and willfully ignorant enforcement of our laws. Please, let us be crystal clear in our direction to our police with our city policy. If this council wants our police to really selectively enforce federal law, then I challenge this council to openly and transparently say so by taking responsibility and authorship of such a policy. Make this published procedure a Westminster Police city policy. I challenge this council to precisely tell the residents of Westminster and the public at large how our police will operate in a clear, unambiguous, and detailed way. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm going to be brief because I don't believe I need to address every single misstatement, analogy, or opinion that my fellow counselor, Bruce Baker, just espoused. Bruce Baker has made known his views on immigration for quite some time. In fact, when he was running to be the Republican candidate for Congress in the primary, he was running on an anti-immigration ticket, anti-immigration for both legal and illegal immigration. So I understand that this is a core issue for him. But I do feel that it's important because he felt it necessary to read what he wanted to include in our statement, that I read the full statement. What we just did as a council is no different than what we did when we renovated our front plaza and this room. We have an ethic in Westminster that we want to make sure our residents know that they are included, that they are welcome. And regardless of your politics, I think most of us recognize that after the election, there was some anxiety in different populations. And so we wanted to clearly, for the record, let people know what the long-standing practice was of our police department in regards to immigration status. When is it checked? When is it not? And so nothing has changed. This is something that we wanted to do just to alert people as to what our current policy is. To pretend that we are transforming something to compare us to George Wallace or Mealy or the My Lai massacre, to me, is ridiculous. But let me take one moment to read this to you. And I apologize. I know we've all sat through this already. The city of Westminster, Colorado is home to diverse communities, including immigrants from Mexico, refugees from Laos, and many other cultures and identities. As a city, we have been and will continue to be committed to the public safety, health, and quality of life of all residents, regardless of race, immigration status, ethnicity, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, religion, national origin, age, or physical or mental ability. The city has always sought to be a welcoming place for our residents, business owners, and workers. And we will continue to uphold this same standard of service to our community. Our city facilities, including our court, libraries, and recreation centers, continue to be a place where all people are welcome and where fairness, respect, and equality of service is our top priority. Recently, some members of our community have expressed questions related to local enforcement of federal immigration laws. The legal authority for enforcement of federal immigration laws lies primarily with federal authorities. Officers of the Westminster Police Department do not inquire about one's immigration status unless it is somehow directly related to an ongoing criminal investigation. Our officers take no action, i.e. detaining a person, solely related to a person's legal status in this country. We have followed the law and practiced policing in this manner for decades and will continue to do so. Likewise, we do not support the use of hate speech, and we take seriously reports of bias-motivated crimes against any member of our community. As a member of Welcoming America's Welcoming Cities and Counties initiative, The city recognizes that we are all members of the Westminster community, regardless of where we are born or what we look like. By working together, we can achieve greater prosperity and make our community the kind of place where diverse people from around the world feel valued and want to put down roots. As a city, we look to our residents for guidance and support on being a more welcoming and inclusive community. The Westminster Inclusivity Board, formed in November 2015, is a group of residents appointed by City Council. They work with our council to advocate for all voices in our community and to ensure everyone is treated with fairness, dignity, and respect. There's then information on how you can find more about this. For me, this inspires pride in the city I live in and the people I work with, and that legacy of inclusion that this city has had for decades. It is abhorrent to me that this inspires disgust. I realize you've all sat here for quite some time, so that will be all I have to say. But I would ask if our city attorney would feel comfortable in explaining the role in federal enforcement versus local enforcement of immigration law.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Seitz. As I told the council last week, I'm unaware of any express authority for local police to enforce federal immigration laws. To the contrary, the Supreme Court has found that cities and local law enforcement do not have the authority to investigate and detain solely based upon immigration status. When our police get involved, they investigate crimes. They determine whether or not they have probable cause to make an arrest for a crime. They aren't searching solely for immigration violations, and they won't detain people solely on the basis of their immigration status. So to the extent that that's helpful, I would reiterate that and say that my office did review the statement that went onto the website, and we approved it.
Pinter.
Ooh, okay. So, y'all have been here for a little bit. The purpose of this city is our community. And this is shown in so many meaningful, powerful, and direct ways every single day. I will just make 2 short comments about who lives in our city and why they live here. Any of you who have known me, you know that I am the child of an immigrant. My father immigrated to this country when he was 9. In my family on that side, my Aunt Susie, who was born shortly after arrival, was the first person in our family to get a social security number. And what ends up happening in a lot of families is you have mixed documentation status, which means that you have people from all kinds of different backgrounds with all kinds of different types, visas, standards, where they come, who they are they born here, green card, what have you. These people that Mr. Baker referred to as the underclass, like my father, grow up to serve this country, provide for this country, and honor this country. I am proud of my father's military service. I am proud of the contributions he has made to this country, and I am proud of all of my fellow community members for all they give and all they do every day. I am inspired by those who work for this city. I am inspired by those in our fire service who have for 80 years visited the children of this city to wish them a Merry Christmas and bring them Santa on a fire truck and maybe a little bit of sweet treat as well. I am proud of our police department who has stood by their fellow man again and again and again and who lost one of their own. We just had a funeral service December 9th. Many of our staff attended. It is a great loss, and I would encourage you to look at the rules about driving safely on our highways so we can protect our law enforcement as they are striving to protect us. You can see it right out here in our lobby, these beautiful poinsettias, a wonderful greenhouse program revived after a few years. Our own greenhouse grows over 1,000 poinsettias very carefully over many months to be shared with everyone in all of our city buildings and with the community, and it's a beautiful thing to look at, and I'm told at the end of the season a giveaway to those who work here in our city buildings and at City Hall. All of these little things, whether it's a poinsettia or military service, are all things that give back to our community. And I just want you to know There is a reason a majority of this council stood up for making this a welcoming city. There is a reason why we stand by our police and fire, and there's a reason why we all stand up to protect each other. Because we are strong as a community, and it is that strength that brings us comfort and safety.
Ms. Bird.
Still getting used to our new system here. So I want to echo the sentiment. I'm grateful that Councilor Seitz and Councilor Pinter made the statements that they did, and that Councilor Seitz read the statement as it is instead of cherry picking and I think falsely representing what message we were trying to send to our community. That message is something that I'm deeply proud of. To me, it is indicative of the community that I aspire to be part of and to continue contributing to. It's a message of inclusion and how we as a city view our community and everyone who lives here. We want to use city resources and our time and energy to build communities, not tear them apart. So you see this every day, and in fact, before comments kind of went down this other road, there were a couple things that now I see they fit so lovely into our dialogue this evening. I can share them to show two precise examples of what our city does to build communities. So 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity and privilege of attending a luncheon to celebrate. I had to write this down to make sure I get the title here. But we have 25 years of our domestic violence fast track program. This is a wonderful program that helps handle domestic violence cases within our city. But we have a great cadre of volunteers, advocates, victim advocates, and staff advocates who are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I believe last month they gave over 800 hours of volunteer services going out and helping and aiding people who've been victims of crime and domestic violence within our city, letting people know what their rights are as victims and what resources are out there and available to them. It's a wonderful act of compassion and something that we extend to our residents in some of their darkest hours. I couldn't be prouder that our city advocates for this and makes sure that this is available for our residents. Something else I wanted to mention, another great way that our city builds communities is our Public Works Department. Just was contacted by Adams 12 School District and is helping them make sure that their water is safe so that kids are drinking clean, safe water and making sure that they remain that way. So this is city resources being used to keep kids in our city safe. And thank you to our Public Works Department. Thank you to our Police Department. So many times over, all of you, our city works to build communities, and that's a city that I'm proud of.
Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Franco, could you clarify something for me? You said that local police are not authorized to detain solely on the basis of immigration status. Paraphrasing you a little bit, but is that correct?
Correct.
Where's that from? Where's the legal authority for that?
That's the U.S. Supreme Court decision.
That came from the United States Supreme Court. That didn't come from this city council, did it? Correct. So any notion that what this city council is trying to do is coerce and pressure and strong arm our police department is just completely misleading. We felt that it was very important that we put out a statement because, as it's been mentioned by counselors before, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear in this incredibly tight-knit community that we have in Westminster. We wanted to send a message to people that if you are the victim of domestic violence, you do not need to be afraid to pick up the phone and call the police. If there's a medical emergency in your home, you do not need to be afraid to call 911 because we are a community and we are going to offer you the services that are going to protect your health, your safety, and your well-being. And we are not directing our city officers to ignore anything. This is a long-standing policy that is rooted in United States Supreme Court decisions, and we felt that it was important that we let our residents know that Westminster is going to remain a welcoming city and it's going to remain a welcoming community. So I appreciate that statement that was released, and I was signed on it as a supporter of it and tried to promote it everywhere that I could because I want everybody to know we are a welcoming city and you need to be comfortable in living in Westminster. That's my comments on that part. I've never been compared to George Wallace and Orville Faubus, so that's an interesting note from tonight. But I do want to take a minute to talk about what a welcoming city we are and some of the great things we do in Westminster. You know, and I wanted to mention something. I had written a whole bunch of notes here, and I still think it's appropriate that we commend our city staff. despite the turn this discussion has taken. I want to take a moment to commend our library department. Councilor Seitz and I had an opportunity to go to the National League of Cities Conference in Pittsburgh, and one of the sessions I took was at the Carnegie Library. Beautiful library, incredible programs, and we sat there and they just went over a litany of programs and services that are offered at that library. And the thing that I found fascinating is it's so many things that we already do here in Westminster. And it was such a validation for the amazing work of our library department. They do really innovative things like the Harry Potter Yule Ball that happened a couple of weeks ago. I was talking to our library director who told me, and that was held at our Irving Street Library. And there were more people in attendance there that attended our Halloween party at the College Hill Library, which is one of the biggest events of the year. And I think that really goes to show what incredible community building is taking place in our library systems. And I just want to commend our library director, Emily Littlejohn, Justin Cutler, Jason Gank, who's back here, and Don Tripp. It all comes from the city manager. And just say thank you for the amazing community building work that they're doing in our libraries, because we're the innovators in that area. And it's really great program to have in Westminster. And then finally, I just want to mention our public works department. For some of you who drove on Sheridan the other day, you may notice that there was a little bit of a traffic jam. There was a major water main break there that happened, and our public works department went out there, worked expedited. They worked quickly, they worked efficiently, and the weather wasn't always great. I mean, it could have been much worse, as we talked about when it happened, but the weather was still pretty bad, and our public works department were out there working as hard as they can to get it repaired quickly and to limit the inconvenience to motorists in Westminster. And I just want to commend the public works department on an amazing job they did in taking care of that matter.
Mr. Canberra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I want to start by welcoming everybody here today. These are just beautiful chambers, and I'm so excited. And thanks for everybody that worked really hard to make the renovations, because not only does our chamber looks amazing, but also, you know, it's more accessible. And we want to make sure that when you come here, that you're able to really look at the presentations and that you feel more welcome. You know, it's not my style to pile on when many of my colleagues are saying the same thing, because I don't want to bore you. I know you have probably more interesting things to do, but it's kind of difficult not to comment on something that it's, in my opinion, it's false information. I just want to clarify, when these remarks were being put together, we worked with our chief of police to make sure that the information that we were sending were in compliance. We are following the law, and I'm not quite sure what Mr. Baker wants us to do, because essentially what I hear him suggesting could actually potentially cost millions of dollars to our taxpayers. And as the counselor, it is my job to protect our money and to make sure that we're investing and using our resources in the best way possible. You know, I was looking at Maricopa County, which they were essentially, you know, stopping people just because they thought they were undocumented. And I think as of May of 2016, they had paid over $54 million of taxpayer dollars of lawsuits because of wrongful implementation of immigration laws. What we're doing here is we are making sure that people feel welcome. And, you know, our job, my job as a counselor, is to represent everybody in our community. Whether you agree or disagree with me on issues, whether you're from my same background or not, it is our job to represent everybody, regardless if you voted for us or not. And that is something that we need to always remember. We cannot take for granted the current climate. People are afraid. People don't know if they can trust their neighbors, and that's something we hear time and time again from our residents. You know, I want to share this with y'all. The other day I was, and I've shared this with a couple of my colleagues, but the other day I was at a nail salon. And when I entered, I was speaking on the phone in Spanish with my husband. I speak in English everywhere, but with my husband, we speak in Spanish. And I had someone sitting next to me tell me, this is an English-only country. We don't speak Spanish here. I wasn't speaking to anybody. I was speaking to my husband in the phone. The reality is, some people don't feel welcome, and this happened in our city. This happened a couple blocks from my house. So we as a council have a responsibility to make sure everybody here feels welcome, regardless of whether you like them or not. And that is key. And that is what we're doing here. And for that, I want to thank all of our staff, and I want to thank our chief of police for his leadership and the rest of my colleagues. Because we want to make sure people here feel welcome. Think about it. I was born here, and I was told, hey, this is not how things work. Imagine how people that are less fortunate than I am are feeling right now. I've had many friends and family who are also citizens, not undocumented. Some of the first calls I got after the election were, do you think they're gonna take my citizenship away? So we really are trying to make sure that people in our city feel safe. And as Councilor Garcia said, we wanna make sure that people also, report crimes, that they cooperate with our police. That is one of the first things we wanna make sure people do. So I wanna thank our police department for everything that you do to keep us safe. And I really wanna thank everybody here because I have never been prouder to represent our city. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Sight?
I apologize. I got a little fired up earlier and forgot to mention forgot to compliment our staff on an achievement that they received while I was at the National League of Cities in Pittsburgh. While I was at the National League of Cities, I was able to be present when our city was awarded their 14th Digital Cities Award. We only did not win this award 1 year over the last 15 years, and that was because we did not apply 1 year. We did get 4th place, which is incredible for our city, for cities in our size. And this year there was an additional scoring category. And so David Putney, who is our department head for IT, wanted to let us know that this is really a scoring category that is part of the strategic vision and the plan of our city, and I think it really fits into this conversation well. It was on citizen engagement and the efforts that we make as a city to digitally connect to our citizens. And because of that ethic we have, we were able to score significantly higher than obviously the other communities. So I just want to say thank you to our staff that are constantly working to actualize those visions and to make Westminster a connected community.
Yeah, I'm going to try to close this. For those of you in the audience, this council is very aware of Mr. Baker's stance on immigration. This is not something new. We've had a number of conversations with the police department, our city attorneys. And Mr. Baker's opinion is Mr. Baker's opinion. It is not the opinion of the city council or of this city. However, he has the right to express his opinion, even though we may all be in full disagreement with that. So I would ask you to take things that have been said here tonight, to listen carefully to what was said, and understand that, yes, on this point of immigration, we are in disagreement with Mr. Baker and his comments. And I don't appreciate them, but he still has the right to make them. We will enforce the law as we are destined to do under guidance of our city attorney and our police chief. And if the chief ever feels that this council is in any way pressuring him not to obey the law, he better be the first one to tell us, because it's not true. We respect him and his group. We know they understand the law and they know how to enforce it. We expect them to comply with the requirements of the law and the city council. To that end, I'd like to end this piece and actually get to some of the business tonight. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. We have already surveyed the city council. No one has asked for any item on this consent agenda to be removed, so at this point I will open up the consent agenda for a motion. Mr. Baker.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that, the city council adopt, the consent agenda, items 8A through 8H.
We have a motion and a second. All right. Please use your buttons as your. Ms. Parker, go ahead, please. Got one more.
Oh.
There we go. Now we have a vote.
Weren't we doing verbal as well as?
No, all right, we can be taught. We'll figure it out. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and we have a vote of 7-0 to accept the consent agenda. We'll move on to the next item, appointments and resignation. There are none tonight. First item on the agenda in the public hearing and others is the item 10A. This is a Rocky Mountain High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Grant application. At this time, I will open the floor to a motion. Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Mayor, I move to authorize the city to receive and administer the 2017 Rocky Mountain High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Grant in the amount of $359,684 on behalf of the North Metro Task Force.
Is there a second? Michelle, the screen's gone. I can't see who's up. All right, I have a motion and a second. This will again be a motion of your vote by your button, so if you could, please go ahead and cast your ballots. Okay. We have a vote of 7-0 to accept item 10A. Garcia, would you please?
Mr. Mayor, I move to pass Councilor's Bill number 50 on first reading, appropriating grant funds to be received from the 2017 Rocky Mountain High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Grant to the 2017 General Fund budget.
Do we have a second on the motion? We have a motion and a second. Ms. Barker, if you would take the roll.
Just want to remind everybody, please turn on your mic. Atchison,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
DeCambra,
Yes.
Garcia,
Yes.
Pinter,
Yes.
and Sights.
Yes.
And if you would also please hit your buttons.
We're missing
One more.
Got a vote too.
So busy cleaning up the mess. Thank God Barbara Opie's not here. She can see this from where she is.
Okay,
Thank
we
you.
have a first, a second. We have 7-0.
Yes, sir. I move to authorize the submission of a grant application by the police department to the Rocky Mountain High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area for an amount up to $600,000 for the 2018 grant year to be applied to the operations of the North Metro Task Force.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please signify with a vote. Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to the next item is item B1. This is Council Bill number 51 regarding the Strasburg Natural Resource Farm lease. Is there a motion?
Oh.
All right, Ms. Berg.
I move to pass Councilor's Bill number 51 on first reading, authorizing the city manager to sign 3 one-year lease agreements for 1 single-family home, 1 trailer pad, and 1 agricultural lease of 1,395 acres at the city's Strasburg Natural Resource Farm, beginning on January 1st, 2017.
We have a motion. Is there a second to the motion? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, or if there are no comments, please signify with your vote.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Michelle. Go back.
No worries.
Go ahead, go through the motion.
That's fine. Baker,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
DeCambra,
Yes.
Garcia, Pinter,
Yes.
Sights,
Yes.
Atchison.
Yes. Vote stands 7-0. Last item on B would be 2. Ms. Berg.
I move to automatically renew these 3 leases for 4 additional one-year terms expiring on January 1, 2022.
Is there a second to the motion? There's a motion and a second. Is any discussion? Hearing not, if you would, please cast your vote. Motion passes on a 7-0 vote. Next item on the agenda will be item 10C, the resolution for the City of Westminster 2017 Legislative Policy Statement and Lobbying Protocols. Is there a motion?
Yes.
Ms.
I'm-
Sights?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt resolution number 44, establishing the City of Westminster 2017 Legislative Policy Statement and Lobbying Protocols.
a second to the motion? Any discussion on the motion?
Byrd,
Yes.
DeCambra,
Yes.
Garcia,
Yes.
Pinter,
Yes.
Sights,
Yes.
Atchison,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Here, Mr. Canberra, I don't show your vote stuff.
I apologize. I closed
Did-
it. I apologize.
You got it?
Sorry. I heard you all verbally, and I believe I closed it early. The vote, I recorded the vote as 7-0.
Okay, thank you. This is why we do the new ones. All right, last item on the agenda will be 10E. Oh, D? I guess we probably. All right, this is resolution number 45, South Highlands Creek Drainage. Is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt resolution number 45, authorizing the city manager to sign the intergovernmental agreement with the Urban Drainage and Flood Control District for the South Highland Creek Drainage and Flood Control Project.
Is there a second to the motion? There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion by council? Hearing none, all those please cast your vote.
We're gonna roll call that.
Uh,
DeCambra.
we get through 2 nights of this, we'll be lucky.
We'll be okay. DeCambra,
Go ahead, Ms. Parker.
Garcia, Pinter, Sights,
Yes.
Atchison,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Byrd.
Yes.
And I need one more.
Now we got 7.
All right.
Yeah, all right, the motion passes on a 7-0. Now let's try to go to 10E. Got it? Take 10E.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt resolution number 46, amending the city council rules and regulations, except for 8A-2, which we have amended. We're removing.
Second.
Frankel, any update on that?
No, just to make clear that paragraph will be removed.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is a roll call. Ms. Parker, we'll get this.
Garcia, Pinter,
Yes.
Sights,
Yes.
Atchison,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
DeCambra.
Yes.
One
Missing.
more. All right.
All right, try again. 7-0. Yeah, we're going to get through this night no matter what. Ladies and gentlemen, I hate to tell you, but we're going to be finished with the city council items for now. Unfortunately, we're not done. We will adjourn as the Westminster City Council, and we will now re-adjourn under the same roll call as the Downtown General Improvement District Agenda Board of Directors. At this point, the board would be asked to prepare a recommendation for acceptance of the meeting minutes of the November 28th meeting. Is there a motion? Mr. Baker, go ahead.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the board approve, well, the minutes of the November 28th, 2016 meeting as they are presented.
Ms. Benter?
Second.
Is there a motion and a second on the floor for the acceptance of the meeting minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Hearing none, the motion is carried. First item on the agenda is to move Councilor's Bill number 49 on second reading to include the City of Westminster owned land into the General Improvement District. This will be a roll call vote, but I need a motion. Ms. Byrd, if you would.
I move to pass Councilor's Bill number 49 on second reading to include the City of Westminster owned land into the General Improvement District.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, this is a roll call. Ms. Parker?
Pinter,
Yes.
Sights, Atchison,
Yes.
Baker,
No.
Byrd,
Yes.
DeCambra,
Yes.
Garcia.
Yes.
Motion passes on a 6-1 vote. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the business of the General Improvement District for tonight. This meeting is adjourned. We will take a short recess, and we will reconvene in the ante-room for the public comment period and the open discussion on the construction litigation bill